Okay. Twig,
Hi, here we are.
welcome back.
Thank
Here
you.
we are.
Glad
It's
to
summer. It's
be here.
book.
I haven't seen you for so long.
I know. Yeah.
Like a day. So, let's see. I'm Twig George. I am the co-author of this book called Crowbar, the smartest book in the world. And I'll tell you a little bit about it as we go. But first, I want to introduce Eric Fishel, who's here somewhere. Is he there?
I'm here.
Okay, he's here. He's from the Birds of Urban Baltimore group, BUrB, and knows a lot about birds. And I think what we'll do, Eric, is I'll go through the book and read the book and tell the stories. And I have two videos that are really great to show, and then turn it over to you for a few minutes, and then maybe we can both answer questions. Does that work?
Yeah, sure. So if people have any questions about the ecology of the birds, just either put them in the chat or think of them for later, and I'd be happy to discuss with y'all once Twig is done with their presentation.
Okay. Okay, so here's Crowbar, and it was a book that began as really a story of some of the birds and the animals that we raised when I was a kid. This is my mother. She is an author. She's written over 115 books for kids. And growing up with her and my father, who was a scientist, and everybody else in my family who were scientists, we were the neighbors and the people that ended up taking in the orphan birds and the orphan animals and bringing them back to health. And so this is Crowbar, and we had, during the time I was in school, we raised 173 wild animals in our house. Not wild like tigers, but wild like lived out in the native area. And 4 of them were crows, and 4 of them were our favorite of many, many other animals. And they were so smart, and they were so funny, and they seemed to know us. And in this picture, I love this picture of Mom because she looks like she's instructing the crow. And after you spend a lot of time with crows, you wonder who's instructing who. I don't know. And one of the books that she wrote, which was stories about all the animals, is The Tarantula in My Purse, which is another one we could do sometime. So Crowbar, the smartest bird in the world. There are many smart birds, as we have come to know. Crows are ingenious, I think. And we brought this little crow into our lives. And my mother wrote this story about 20 years before she died. And then we found it and we finished it because it's such a wonderful story. And I think we can all have experience with crows. And crows are all around us. A murder of crows is what they call a group of crows. And this is a picture of a crow. This is the end paper with a key. And they like shiny things. And they hold the key to a lot of things. And this is the dedication page, which most people don't read. But sometimes if you read the dedication pages in the book, there's some interesting things. This is we thank to all the animals whose antics and intelligence brought us so much joy over the years. And so it begins. On a walk, one early spring morning, I spotted a baby crow on the ground. He was too young to fly. He was wobbly and cold. 2 cats watched hungrily. I knew he wouldn't last long. I couldn't find the nest or his parents, so I tucked him under my shirt and carried him home. And there's a couple of important words in there. And one is that he was too young to fly, he was wobbly, he was cold, and that there were 2 cats nearby who were watching. Because you shouldn't just scoop up an animal and take it home. It's best if you can leave them or put them in a safe place until their parents can find them and feed them. But if they're in danger or they're very weak, then it might be time. As soon as I got home, my mom showed me what to do. I fed the baby crow hamburger and cheese until he fell asleep in my arms. Can we keep him? I asked. Mom paused. It's a hard job, she said softly. She worked at a bird rescue center, helping injured and orphaned birds, so she knew not all of them made it. Please, Mom, I begged and held my breath. And we had to make her a bird rescue person because you have to have a license to bring these birds into your home these days. Okay, you can keep him, but only until he's ready to live on his own. And he's very weak. He may not live long. I know, I said sadly, but we can try. I'd be careful if I were you. Crows can be real pests, Grandpa called from the next room. Crows are smart, and his name is Crowbar, I answered. A crowbar is a tool, not a bird. Grandpa was getting a little testy. Crows use tools, and he's mine only for a little while. Only humans use tools, said Grandpa. And when I was growing up, the scientists believed, or the basic, idea among scientists was that humans were the only ones that used tools. And we had all these animals, and the crow was definitely using tools, but Mom didn't feel that she could write the books until that became more accepted because they kind of run her out of town. And she wrote a lot of science and nature books. Crowbar made raspy cries. He thinks you're his mother, Mom said. He needs to be fed. I fed him 30 times a day. Crows are scavengers. They eat anything, so I fed him hamburger, cheese, eggs, even chunks of corn muffins. He ate and ate and ate. How did his parents find enough food with no hands or grocery stores? And they really do eat a lot. When you take on a young animal like this, you really have to be committed to it. They eat often and a lot. Luckily, in this case, ravens are scavengers, so we could feed him a variety of food. Sometimes they need special food, so you have to be careful. In a few days, he could stand. In 2 weeks, he was bouncing out of his box. So not only did we rescue some crows, but we also had blue jays and robins and all kinds of baby birds, and we had them in teacups on the table, and they didn't last there very long. When they were very, very little, we could feed them with droppers in the teacups, but then they started bouncing all over the place. And in a month, Crowbar was able to fly. He eats, he calls, he flies. When are you going to let him grow? Grumbled Grandpa. Almost as if he understood what Grandpa said, Crowbar walked to the open door. He fluttered his wings and flew outside. But Crowbar didn't fly away. Instead, he took up a perch in the apple tree near the kitchen window. Our yard was now his home. Crowbar lived outside and learned to eat beetles, frogs, and worms, but he was still part of our family. He rapped on my window every morning and cried, "Caw, caw, caw," to wake me up. I opened the window and let him in. At breakfast, he ate my leftovers. His favorite was bacon and eggs. Well, he did roost outside my bedroom window, and he would tap on my bedroom window and come in. And when he was with us, he would walk. So he jumped onto the bed. He would walk down on the floor. He'd jump down the stairs. He'd come eat breakfast with us. Mom always made, I don't know, she wrote all these books. She did all these things. And somehow she made us breakfast every morning with bacon, eggs, oatmeal, toast, orange juice, and the whole works. And he enjoyed that. And then on school days, he walked beside me to the bus stop. He sat on the fence with us until the bus came. Mom said that when the bus was gone, he flew home and cawed 4 times at the kitchen window. She knew then that I was off to school. Grandpa watched and didn't say a word. Well, we didn't know that for like 40 years. We would walk to the bus stop with the crow. He would wait on the post until we got on the bus. We'd run to the back of the bus. And then as the bus went down the road and turned the corner, we'd all be looking back and we'd see Crowbar lift off. But we never knew where he went. And it wasn't until I went to school with my mother about 40 years later that she told the rest of the story. And that was it. He came back to the house and knocked on the kitchen window. And that's how she knew we were safely on a bus, which was fine with us to send a crow. We thought that was a good solution. Mom gave me a book about bird communication. I learned that crows speak to each other in their own language. Their words are ah, tat, 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 too. Eric could probably do a better job of this, and dong. And they one time we were trying to fool Merlin, if you have Merlin, and trying to make crow sounds and raven sounds. It took a long time before it accepted us, but that was kind of fun. I heard Crowbar practicing outside. Because you're part of Crowbar's family, Mom explained. He'll learn the words you say if you repeat them often enough, like a parrot. I said hello enough times to teach a salamander, but Crowbar would not speak English. Grandpa watched and did not say a word. And then one day, our mailman knocked on the door. He looked surprised when I opened it. I swear I heard you say hello from up in that tree, he said. I ran across the yard. Hello, I heard my own voice coming from the apple tree. Crowbar flew down to my shoulder. Hello, he repeated. Mom, Grandpa, I yelled. Come out here. Crowbar can speak. Mom flung the door open. Hello, Crowbar said to her. Now that's really smart, I said. Grandpa didn't say a word. And this really happened, only it wasn't a mailman. This was so long ago, like 60 years ago, that it was a milkman. We used to have milkmen that came to the house every day, every other day, and brought milk and took away the bottles. And he was a very friendly fellow. And he came in. He was sort of in shock. He thought he heard my mother speaking from the top of the tree, and he was so glad to see her sitting at the kitchen table. And then when he left, we all ran out, and there the crow was saying hello, hello. But that's not all the crow did. So the crowbar learned how to use his words to his advantage. He would fly to our neighbors' picnics, land on the table, and say hello in his clear voice. Worried, the neighbors would herd their children and friends inside away from the strange talking crow. Which was fine with him. He would gobble down their potato skin, salad, hamburgers, hot dogs, cheese, and olives. And then, just like a wild crow, he would hide some tidbits in a tree. When my mother heard there was a talking crow that invaded picnics, she laughed. He won't hurt anyone, she told them. He just wants a treat. Soon Crowbar was a welcome guest at picnics. And if he was smart enough to join picnics and hide food, I hoped he could learn to be a wild crow. And this really happened also. He put that word to use, and he'd go down and he'd land on a picnic table and look everybody in the eye and say hello, and they disappear, and he had the whole picnic table to himself. And Mom did tell him it. He said, it won't hurt anyone. Just give him a treat. I think the neighbors kind of looked at us strangely sometimes. We had a lot going on in our house that didn't happen in most of the houses. One day, Mom's new bracelet disappeared. I bet Crowbar hid it, I said. And sure enough, I found it in the sugar bowl. Crowbar's smart. He seems to know what we think is important, and he also likes shiny things. Next, I couldn't find my lunch money. Maybe Crowbar likes money too, Grandpa said. Or he knows we like it, I said, and that's really, really smart. We found my money in the flower pot. But that's not a tool, Grandpa mumbled as I took my money and left for the school bus with a crowbar right behind me. And this was interesting too. So Crowbar would fly down to the school where my brother was during research. And out of 50, 100 kids that were out on the school grounds, he could find my brother, and he'd fly down and land on his shoulder. And then the kids they knew they liked shiny things. They started giving them the dimes from their lunch money. And he took it and flew it over to the bank. This is true. And put it in the gutter, because the bank was right across the parking lot from the school. And they'd fly back and get more. And years later, I asked the bank if they had ever found anything or something, but they didn't know what I was talking about. But it was pretty funny. My friend Melissa came over one day. We made a city in the sandbox and used Mom's best spoons as flags for the castle. Crowbar flew down to join us. Suddenly, he snatched a spoon and flew off with it. Mom, I called, I'm not playing with that crow anymore. He steals. Told you, crows are thieves, Grandpa cackled. Now, this was also a true story. I was making a sandcastle, and I thought Mom's shiny spoons would look great as flags in the castle. And it turns out they were her real silver spoons. And the crow came down and put them in a notch of a tree about 50 feet off the ground. And I knew I was in trouble. So I was trying to preempt the talk that was coming from my mother when I ran and told her about the spoons. But then she suggested, we'll play on the slide, Mom suggested from the doorway. Crows can't slide. Their feet are designed to hold onto tree limbs without slipping. Melissa and I chased each other down the slide once, twice, 3 times. Grandpa came out to watch. Crowbar flew to the top of the slide, landed, and fluttered his wings. He didn't move an inch. You showed him, Grandpa shouted. With that, Crowbar flew to the sandbox and picked up a jar lid he liked to play with. He carried it to the top of the slide, stepped on it, zoom, went down the slide. Down the slide went Crowbar. Grandpa shouted to my mother, come out here and see this. This dang crow used a tool. He turned to me and said with a smile, look at that. Crows are pretty darn smart. Really smart, echoed Melissa. So this really happened. And it was, again, at a time when scientists were saying that no other animal could use tools. And here's Crowbar sliding down the slide with a coffee can lid. And that was just that was the beginning. And over the next weeks, Crowbar spent less and less time with us. I missed him. One day, a great flock of crows landed in the yard. I looked at each bird, but I couldn't tell if Crowbar was among them. Then one bird dropped out of the tree, cocked his head, and cawed 4 times. It was Crowbar. I didn't know then, but he was saying goodbye. And again, the crows can recognize us, but we can't pick out the crows. But if you look very carefully at this picture, you'll notice that one might be Crowbar in there if you look carefully. The next time the cloud of crows lifted, Crowbar was gone. He had joined his flock. They would teach him the rest of what it was to be a crow. So that was the end. And the beginning of, at the back, we have some information about, everybody wants to know if they can have a pet crow. You have to pass some tests. You have to be, a collector or have a rehab license. So the best thing to do is to take them to a rehab center, and there's some information about that. And then I'm going to have 2 videos. They're my favorite crow videos. And this one is about a crow named 007 that solved an 8-part puzzle to get a treat.
All right, can I stay in here?
Absolutely, you can sit and watch.
Right.
And we'll see what happens.
Come on then, send in your mastermind because it's going to need that.
Alex studies wild birds, which he releases after 3 months of research. This one is nicknamed 007, and it's about to attempt what Alex believes is one of the most complex tests of the animal mind ever constructed. The bird is familiar with the individual objects, but this is the first time he's seen them arranged like this. 8 separate stages that must be completed in a specific order if the puzzle is to be solved. And if the bird succeeds, it'll be a world first. He takes time to have a look and then starts with the short stick. Stage 1. He finds it's too short to reach the food. He then sets off to get the first stone. But he drops it. And another. He seems to be stuck. But then, something seems to click. He deploys the first stone. And then another. Got it. The 8th and final stage. Success. 8 individual stages of one complex puzzle completed. That was remarkable. I've never, ever seen anything like it. Of all of the bird behaviour that I've seen, nothing matches that. I can hardly believe it. I'm still just running that sequence through my mind. It happened really quickly. But the immediate question is, of course, how on earth did that crow do that?
And then there's one more. I just think that's incredible. So after years of telling that story about the crow zooming down the slide on the coffee can lid, I began to think, how when you tell stories over and over, year after year, they kind of get better after a while. And I thought, did that really happen? And I was trying to, and it was a time now, then I had internet. And so I looked on the internet and I found this video.
With the storm.
And there's the crow. Look at that. Look at that. Whee! Goes down. And then he brings it back up. And then he goes to another spot. It's not as successful there. He's kind of stuck. It's not moving like it did. So he thinks about it. He's moving a little bit. And then he's kind of done with that. So he goes back to where he had a good ride. Puts it down. Whee! And he goes again. And then he gets to the end and he pushes. He wants it to go further. It's like he's trying to make a toboggan run. And I was just so glad to see this because, and since then you can find this a lot on the internet. So it's true. He did use tools and he was very successful. So, Eric, you probably have a lot of more information about crows or other birds in the area.
Yeah, so I can talk a little bit about some of the basics about crows and crow intelligence, particularly crows here in Maryland or corvids here in Maryland. Um, First, I will introduce myself. Hello, everybody. I'm Eric. I'm the executive director of Birds of Urban Baltimore, or BUrB, and we help connect people to nature in their neighborhoods, specifically in Baltimore, to help connect people in really intimate ways with up-close, hands-on experiences with nature, particularly birds. I've been working as a bird scientist since 2008. And yeah, I have done a lot of research around the world, including some research on crows and a little bit about crows in Baltimore. So crows, there are 2 species of crows, and 3 species of crow-like birds that you can find here in Maryland, which are going to be the fish crow, the American crow, and the common raven. The raven is actually a relatively new member of the corvid family here in Maryland. About 20 or 30 years ago, there were very, very few. And now they're still not super common, but they're not that uncommon either. There's actually one raven that has a nest on Raven Stadium, and that was not planned. That was completely random. Um, Other members of the corvid family that you might not think of as crows or ravens, but are part of that, are jays. So blue jays are actually in the same family as crows. Magpies, other things like that are all within the crow family. And then other birds that look kind of similar to crows being the grackles, those big, dark black shiny birds that are a little smaller, those are in a different family. Those are actually in the blackbird family, the icterid family. Crows are one of the more famous wildlife in terms of how we understand their intelligence. So it's not necessarily that crows are smarter than other animals and other wildlife. It's that we have put a lot of concentration into figuring out whether or not they reach certain levels of intelligence. The New Caledonian crow in specific is one of the ones that has had the most research given to them, and they are one of the few recorded instances that, at least in the beginning, of wildlife not only using tools, but wildlife building brand new tools for use. So building and manipulating tools for use. Obviously, if you think about tool use in wildlife, the fact that people ever believed that humans were the only thing that used tools is a really, really silly idea. Almost every animal in the or in the wildlife uses tools, from otters using rocks to break shells, to fish using rocks to do things, using other colorful things to build their breeding grounds. There's just literally infinite numbers of instances of animals using tools. And there's a lot of really, really cool uh, research going on about wildlife cognition and about animal intelligence. A lot of the way that we think about it is based off of the values that we give to human intelligence, though. And one of the favorite examples that I use is there's these species of shorebird. So it's similar to a plover, and it's a type of stilt that lives over in Australia. And they can predict when there will be a storm several thousand miles away 2 weeks in advance. And these are storms that only happen every 1 to 5 years and not in a regular pattern. And that
Wow.
is a type of intelligence that we don't necessarily think of when we think about measuring intelligence in wildlife, but it is something that they know something, they can process some sort of information in some way that we simply can't. And there's, again, infinite other examples of wildlife and animals being able to have certain intelligences that humans don't necessarily give as much value to. Um, and thus us saying that, thinking that humans are the smartest species on the planet. And it's just a really, really interesting topic, and there's a whole lot of really interesting research and books on this, particularly in neuroscience and behavioral science. And it's a really, really interesting field because it's one of those things that we can't just ask animals questions. We have to observe and see what we can glean from that. But with that, I am happy to answer any ecology questions, any bird questions, whatever else you guys might have in terms of animal intelligence, crows, corvids, whatever else, whatever any other questions y'all might have.
Thanks, Eric. Well, let's get Twig back on your
Here we are.
turn your your video
That's
on.
I'm not intelligent enough to push the right button to
You need to get the crow to show how you get your
I
video
know.
back.
Really, really. So there we go. Ah.
All right, now I can add a spotlight to both of y'all. All right, and then anybody who has questions, you can put them in the chat box or just raise your hand and we can call and you can unmute and do that. So if you have a question, I'll start. I have a question for Eric, first of all. How do I tell easily a crow from a raven? I mean, we are in Baltimore country, so is there an easy way to tell?
Yeah. So ravens are actually going to be a decent bit bigger than both of our species of crow. So we'll start with the two crows. We have American crow and we have fish crow. And they are only about 10% difference in size, but a big male fish crow, which is the smaller one, will be about the same size of a I'm sorry, a big female fish crow, because in a lot of birds, females are actually larger, will be about the same size as a small male American crow. And the joke always is, if you want to tell if it's a fish crow or an American crow, you ask if it's an American crow, and if they say then it's a fish crow. They have a much more nasally sound, and it's just a little bit different. And they do tend to associate a little bit more around water, but not necessarily in a definitive way. Ravens, on the other hand, are about a third bigger than both fish crows and American crows. So they're quite a bit larger, actually. And then the other two easy identifying factors is one, crows have rounded tails, and ravens have diamond-shaped tails. So that's one of the easier ways of telling. And the other thing that is actually written into bird ID books um, is that ravens will do loop-de-loops. So ravens tend to do more noteworthy acrobatic flying than crows do. Crows will still do acrobatic flying, but not quite as noteworthy as how the ravens do it. But easiest way to tell the difference for someone looking for a really easy indicator is that tail shape. But there's also size, sound, and um, acrobatic flying pattern.
Thank you.
Yeah,
and Twig, did your family
had a lot of raven pets or ravens that choose to stay with them for a while, and they learn to open things. They're quite
Yeah,
agile.
a lot of zoos and aquariums that have ravens as part of their exhibits have to have special cages for them because they learn how to pick the locks for their cages. Um, and one of the reasons why people study crows and ravens for intelligence is because it's not just that they have a pretty high level of intelligence, they're also very curious and very social birds. So they tend to show that intelligence off pretty readily.
Right. They're willing to do some of the things we ask them to do. So there's a group of ravens down at Monticello that started like it trying. They like the rubber on the windshield wipers, and they started pulling all the rubber off the windshield wipers, and the tourists parked there to go on tours. And half the time, the people didn't know that the rubber was gone until they left and the rain started. So they had to teach them to not do that was a long-term project.
So I see this question, how do crows interact with other birds and animals? And the answer is in lots of very interesting ways. So one first major interaction is crows aren't actually scavengers, they're opportunistic feeders, meaning they will feed as scavengers if the opportunity comes up, but they will just eat whatever is available at the time. In fact, as scavengers, they would be pretty bad at it because they're not actually strong enough to get through the skin of even a squirrel. So they need some other animal or some amount of time to start the process of decomposition. But that means that if there is pretty much any other bird with a nest around, the crows will quickly learn where those nests are, find the babies, find the eggs, and eat those babies and eggs. They'll also eat any sick or injured animals that they can find that are relatively small. They like working in cooperation with vultures and other eagles and things like that that are scavengers and getting the dead things a little bit more broken down so that the crows can get in there and eat. It's also pretty funny. There's some videos of crows and ravens tricking vultures into fighting each other so that the crows can get in there and get the food while the vultures fight one amongst one another. Um, You'll also regularly see crows in the breeding season, mobbing hawks and other large raptors. So you'll often just see a hawk on a telephone pole with other small songbirds will do this as well, but crows will do it pretty regularly. But they'll just go and chase the hawks away, even if the hawks probably aren't going to be hunting them, just because they don't want another predator in their territory. Um, but yeah, then depending on the ecosystems that they're in, they either work cooperatively with or kind of as a trickster amongst or antagonistically against a lot of the animals around because like I said, they're very curious. They have a lot of cultural values that even individual populations will act differently amongst different social circumstances within the animals around them. So there's a lot of really, really interesting interactions that they'll have with lots of other birds and lots of other animals.
Including us.
Twig, in your family's exploits with animals and rescue, was it only crows, or did you have any experience with the other corvids? Did you have a jay or a raven or any other corvids that?
my brother had a magpie that he actually had befriended in Utah. He brought it back with him, and the magpies are pretty interesting too. And it got loose for a while, and we couldn't find it. And a good friend of ours, the girl in the book, Melissa, called us and said she had been to the pet store, and he wanted to sell her a black-shouldered raven from India. And did we know what that was? And we said, it's Maggie. It's the magpie. So we ran to the pet store, and he had taken the pet because he was very friendly and was going to sell it as a black-shouldered raven for India. So, they have their own stories. But we also had all the other birds. We had cardinals, we had robins, we had all kinds of birds. And they all, like he said, they're all intelligent. It's whether we recognize it, I think, in our human sensitivities.
Eric, do crows mate for life, or do they not?
Yeah, so mating for life is a really interesting thing amongst the wildlife and bird community in particular. But crows do form pairs, but they also raise their young in family units. So crows and ravens are once they are uh, of maturity. So with crows and ravens specifically, that's about in their second year. They will stay with their parents and aunts or uncles for between 2 and 4 years. So they will help out with raising the rest of the babies and all that other good stuff. Um, Mating for life is such an interesting thing in the wild because crows are a little bit more in the more longer lived spectrum, but one of the examples I always use is like a robin. Say, for example, you are a robin and you have a partner that is your partner and you bred with them year one. They are 3 years old and you're 2 years old. Next year, the 3 year old is 4 years old and you're 3 years old, and 4 years old is the average lifespan for wild robins. So even if you're mating for life, that might just be 1 or 2 seasons. And then if that bird happens to pass away, then you end up finding another mate. And even though you would have mated with that bird throughout the years, typically there's not that much changeover in the pairs for the territory. That being said, mating is another one of those words that make things a little bit more complicated, because just because you are the male and female that is bonded and paired up for a territory doesn't mean that you're the only bird that you are mating with. There's actually individual species. The most famous one is the fairy wrens over in Australia that have 96% extra pair paternity, meaning they make pairs for life. These guys can live 10 years, so they with the same partner for 10 years, but 96% of the babies born are from a different father than the pair. um, so crows, being a more social animal, probably have a pretty decent high number of extra pair paternity for some of those nests. So it's one of those interesting things that when you say mate for life, you think about things like penguins because they're so long lived that it makes a lot more sense rather than saying, yes, those robins mated for life for the 1 year.
Thank you, Eric. There are a couple of questions in the chat, Twig. Can you share anything about the illustrator of the book? Somebody was mentioning how beautiful they were.
The illustrator is Wendell Miner, and he is an illustrator that worked with Mom. I think he did 22 books with her, and they were really good friends. And he would come down to he would come down, and they would have dinner together and talk about an idea for a book. And a week later, Mom would send him a manuscript, and he'd be like, "Wait, I haven't finished the last 4." So they were great friends, and he did a lot of he illustrated for a long time. He did a lot of book covers for adult books, and he's still illustrating.
Wonderful. And we have Susan is asking, when you put the last page of the book up and Crowbar went off and became a crow, living his best crow life, which one was Crowbar?
You find it? Did you find it?
You can't find. Nobody can find it. You want to? You can share your. Oh, here it is. Okay.
A little bit. You can't see. See, can you see just a little bit of color around it?
Okay.
Subtle, but that's Crowbar.
Almost a raven-shaped tail.
Well, oh, maybe we made a mistake. I'm gonna have to turn scavenger to opportunist.
Eric, you might want to say something to Sarah. Has a question. Where can I get more information on how to take care of crows and other bird species?
Yeah, so the best resource is connecting with a local wildlife rehabber. They oftentimes, but not always, accept volunteers. But in order to take care of crows and other bird species, you do need to have not just your rehab license, but there's actually a special one for taking care of birds because crows are luckily a relatively easy one because they are opportunistic feeders. Many other birds have a lot of requirements in their dietary and care needs. But you can check in with one of your local rehabbers to see if they are licensed rehabbers, I should say, to see if they are accepting volunteers. Uh, Often they don't unless you have experience or are willing to commit a lot of time because they get a lot of inquiries. And training someone just for them to show up once or twice isn't always worth their time. Because it is a very, very time intensive thing, and they don't make a whole lot of money, if any, doing this. The biggest licensed wildlife rehabber around the Baltimore region is Phoenix Wildlife Center. Um, and yeah, I would reach out, and then I'm sure there's other places that have resources for training to become a licensed wildlife rehabber. Um,
Yeah, there's some in the back of the book. There's some websites you can go to find information about.
So following up on that, can you give us a little bit more information on? Sometimes people see birds that are out of the nest. They have feathers, and should you leave it alone? I mean, are they fledging? Is that part of the process? Everybody wants to help, but are there things that we should just say, no, leave it alone, and they're going to get back in that nest somehow?
so Twig already touched on this a little bit at the end of their talk, but oftentimes when a bird is out of their nest, it is not that they're going to get back in the nest, it's that they are leaving their nest. Cornell Lab of Ornithology actually has a really good illustrated guide of when to help and when not to help because you can tell people don't pick up a bird if you think it looks old enough, but that doesn't really mean much without a little bit more guidance. And um, again, lots of the general rule is if it seems like it's old enough to have been out of the nest and it's not an imminent danger, leave it alone. If not, then either see if you can get it back in the nest or back in the care of mom or dad, or get it to a wildlife rehabber if they are that young enough that they're not anywhere close to being near out of the nest. But again, like when and how to tell what those differences are, um, is a piece of knowledge that not everyone has. And again, I would recommend look up the Cornell Lab of Ornithology's resource on fledglings versus nestlings, and they have a little simple one pager that you can look at.
So you can't easily tell by how many feathers or how long the feathers are.
The short answer is yes, you can, but without the experience of knowing what that actually looks like, um, there's no set number of feathers or no set length of feathers out of pin that you can easily just describe to somebody.
Okay. We have, and is it true that if you leave gifts out for crows, then they will bring you back gifts? Is this kind of like is that a wives' tale or is that real?
Well, they will bring things. They will bring things, but they don't always bring things. And are they gifts? I don't, that may be, well, Eric probably knows, there are probably some interpretive issues there.
Yeah. So crows are very, very social animals. So if you leave a crow something shiny, that's probably not going to be a thing for them to be like, oh, this is a present for me. If you start, and I'm not recommending that you start feeding crows because that is not necessarily the best thing to do, but there are if one starts feeding a crow outside and making themselves become associated with food and showing the crows other things that they find valuable, like in Twig's household, it was shiny things. Then they might start bringing you the things that they associate with you associating with value. Um, because it's, again, crows are very, very social animals. So it's about building those social pairs, building that relationship, and you're giving them something of value in the food, they're giving you something of value in the shiny thing. So leaving shiny things by itself isn't going to work, but leaving, and if you do want to feed crows in a safe and healthy way, you can leave. They're not going to come to a bird feeder, but they will come out to things like peanuts on the ground. But again, you should try your best, unless there's a situation where a crow absolutely does need rescuing. You should try your best to disassociate the food with humans because it's just best practice for nature.
And we did worry about that because our birds and all of the animals that live with us lived with us. They lived in the house with us. And so they got very comfortable with humans. And that's a double-edged sword. So when they, go back to the wild, if they're too comfortable with people, it can cause trouble for them.
Yeah, one of the famous stories about this is back during the beginning stages of the condor reintroduction. So for those who don't know, there were 23 in 1996, I believe. There were 23 condors left in the world. Um, and scientists captured all of them and started a breeding bird program and then eventually re-released the birds. And one of the first birds that they re-released, they had been doing supplemental feeding with humans. And the first day they re-released it, it went to downtown LA and landed on the street and started walking around with the people, which is not a healthy thing for people or vultures. So then that's when that we learned that you should be using like puppets if you're going to do any hand feeding, so that there's no association with foods and people. So
Yeah.
that vulture, that condor that was released after its first day of release into the wild had to be brought back into captivity for life because it had too much association with people.
Yeah. I hope our animals made it when they got out there. Anything else?
Sarah, are there any information about caring for crows again? It was in the back of the book, and Eric said talk to Phoenix or wildlife rehabbers. You could put that into the chat box.
Yeah, I can send these websites. It's just how to find rehabbers, which we have in Phoenix here, but and also information on permits and what you need to do to be to get licenses. It's a long process. You have to know a lot. But should I give those to you, Bronwyn? We could post them or something, or I can send them to people that signed up.
Yep, that would be fine. Yeah. So Twig,
yes.
Are there any more stories coming out of your childhood adventures with animals that either your mom started or the manuscripts that you're going to be finishing or your own, because you have your own library of books that you've created? So is there anything on the horizon?
There isn't anything on the horizon right now. We finished a book that Mom was almost ready to publish, Galapagos George, about the tortoise in the Galapagos. And then I worked with my brother. There was a story about a bowhead whale that lived in the Arctic. And the story was that this young Inupiat saw the whale being born, which was unusual. And at that time, the whalers came by and they asked him where the whales were. And he didn't tell them, but he sort of glanced towards a cove. And the whalers went in and they killed a lot of the whales. And so he had a curse on him. So for the rest of the generations following, they had to take care of this one little whale that was born there. And it goes on and on through generations and generations. But was working with my brother, who was a bowhead whale biologist, and it was really fun because, as the whales were swimming up, I could ask him, well, what is he looking at? What's he's in the Beaufort saying? It's spring. What does it look like down there? And he would tell me. It was a really great experience. And at the end, they saved each other, so that was good. And he found out they lived 200 years or more. 200. They found one that was 268 years old.
There's some Greenland sharks that are over 500 years old at this point.
Greenland sharks are one of the older ones. But that's a long time. I wonder what they know. And some of those were alive during the Yankee whaling. So where did they go? How did they hide? Interesting. But
do we have any more questions for Twig or Eric and for this wonderful treat on this Sunday afternoon?
I think we're good.
I'm also going to put my email in the comments if anybody wants to connect about anything bird. Yep, I see that. But yeah, if anybody wants to connect with anything bird related around Baltimore or Maryland, I am going to be doing another bird canoe trip with Bex with the Maryland Museum of Natural Sciences. We did one last month and we're doing one again this month. Every Thursday, Friday, and Saturday down at Masonville Cove, we're doing bird banding. And other bird-related projects around the city are going to be coming up pretty soon. So keep an eye out on what we're doing. My email is...
But I can put these ones in there too.
Email is now in the chat. So if y'all want to connect, just shoot me an email.
Let's see.
Yeah, and you see him perching around the Maryland Museum of Natural Sciences as well. And if you haven't come out to the new exhibit, please do so. Come visit me and say hi. I'll take you around and show you the oldest rock in Maryland, and you can touch it. So that'll be kind of exciting. 1.1 billion years old. Not a bird.
It's a great exhibit. It really is great. You got to come see it.
Yeah. Well, Twig, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to share information, knowledge, experience firsthand, and the story of Crowbar. It's wonderful. Thank you all for joining us for our summer book club, and hope we'll see you at some other program, either at the museum or in the field very, very soon. Take care, everybody. Stay well, stay curious, and stay outside and go say hi to a crow today. They're still flying around.
They will know you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.